Welcome back. Well, we're discussing the medium-term budget policy statement and state-owned entities with Pule Mabe, the national spokesperson of the ANC in our Joburg studios. Ashor Saurapan is a DA spokesperson on these issues, a member of Parliament for the Democratic Alliance in our studios in Cape Town. Ashor, you might well remember the commission that was chaired actually by Ria Pierre several years ago that investigated the state of state-owned entities. It made comprehensive recommendations. What do you think needs to happen with SOEs? We have literally hundreds of state-owned entities. What do you think should happen with them in the longer term?
Well, I think the larger ones need to be privatized, particularly the ones that are not strategic. We agree with the Finance Minister. South African Airways should not be owned by the state. It is effectively a middle and upper income subsidy. But for the cost of a flight ticket, you find that it's not that much more expensive or cheaper than any other airline. So it's almost a subsidy that seems to be going nowhere. So there's no point in it being state-owned. If SAA shut down tomorrow, tourism will still continue into this country because there are many airlines who fly into South Africa. The Western Cape has been particularly good at getting international airlines to fly into Cape Town. So by and large, a lot of these SOEs need to be privatized. They've got to be phased, they've got to be strategic, but you've also got to introduce more competition where there are monopolies, like in energy generation. And so it's got to be a phased process that ensures that we don't create private monopolies that are as harmful as public monopolies. We lower costs for consumers in the long term that way. So that's really what needs to be happening with these state-owned enterprises. There's no way around it. We can't put off the hard decisions because unions threaten to switch off the lights or because ANC alliance partners don't like it. We've got debt, government debt, by propping up state-owned enterprises, is crowding out money that should be spent on healthcare and education. In fact, we spend more on government debt. We will spend more on government debt next year than we will on healthcare or education. Which tells us something about the priorities. These interest payments in government debt are getting out of control because of state-owned enterprises. And it's now a stark choice. Are we going to choose the people of our country? Or are we going to choose executives and a handful of people at state-owned enterprises together with their dodgy procurement contracts?
Sure. Okay. Pule Mabe, your response to that? I mean, SAA, why aren't we just selling the thing?
Well, just broadly, Stephen, I think what is important is, as we're just looking at the broader picture that is presented by SOEs, the first approach would be consider the possibility of rationalizing. Rationalize those. If there are SOEs that are performing or have got the propensity to do almost the same thing, rationalize. Bring them together. There is no need to have them doing different things because the biggest debt or the biggest budget that goes to SOEs at times, it's not necessarily on their own operations. Sometimes it could even be on their own human resources. And make sure that where you have got access capacity in terms of your human resources, you are able to deploy them to perform other tasks because there's quite a lot of things that could be done in the state. But also you do that, but also do an overhaul, a review of all your SOEs. Make sure that those that are not performing to their maximum, decide, are you discarding them? Are you rationalizing them? Are you privatizing them? What is the best option? But all of these options that you make must be informed by a certain science. But also, one of the things we said that needs to happen is that creating a capable state would also require that those men and women that are deployed carry themselves in an ethical manner. They protect the national purse. They spend monies where value will be realized. So that when we sit around, we could be able to say that the sort of investments that we are making are yielding positive results. Whether it's through the SAA, whether it's at AXA, at the airport, the people that work there, that do cleaning and all of that, we count that as jobs. Because for us to be able to deal, going back to the question of the national debt, requires us that we create jobs. If we don't create jobs, if we don't look at SAA and all the other SOEs within the context of how much they are able to impact and create mobility within our own economic sphere, we'll not be able to turn things around. So we need each and every asset that we have, whether it's SOEs, whether it's the work that has been done by our own government departments, to yield positive results that could be able to make positive injunctions to our own policy mix.
But that requires hard decisions. It isn't politics well,
we've got to make unpopular decisions, unfortunately.
Sure, but I mean, often it's internal ANC politics. I mean, if the NUM wasn't an affiliate, would what's happening at Eskom be happening at Eskom? If there wasn't a cadre deployment policy and a deployment committee, and so the best possible people on an objective measure were picked to run SOEs, I mean, you know the argument. You know what would have happened perhaps if Sipho Maseko had been asked to run Transnet instead of Telkom. We might not have had the problems at Transnet that we had. I mean, in the end, it all goes back to the internal politics of the ANC and the alliance.
No, but Stephen, we must also accept that they are also changing economic conditions. When the economy changes, it requires that you adapt. You see, because South Africa doesn't operate on its own. We are part of the global economy. So what is happening globally has got an effect on our own country. I mean, I was having a discussion the other day looking at just what is happening with our own ferrochrome mining space. And whether we are doing enough to be able to protect the mineral reserves that we've got in this country so that we can protect the interest of generations to come. What are we doing there? I mean, you'd know that, for instance, energy generation, if we do not solve the energy crisis, we are not going to be able to sustain the mining industry going into the future. So the sort of plans that we are coming up with is to make sure that we salvage the situation, we protect all the other industries that operate within here, but also we protect the future so that generations to come could also be able to live and grow, not just in a democratic country, but in a prosperous country.
Right, we've only got a few minutes left, unfortunately. Ashor, Saurapan, I mean, what do you think the economic picture is going to be presented to our children? I mean, how difficult do you think it's going to be? Or do you think that Eskom and the way that the world is changing is changing quite quickly, that actually some of these problems could be solved more easily in 10 years than they can be solved now?
Yes, well, the reality is we've had 10 years of strong global growth. So to blame changing global conditions now when the ANC has pursued policies that have dampened South Africa's growth in an era of strong economic growth, I find a bit odd and difficult to believe. We've seen firsthand state capture. We've seen all sorts of things. Let's use Eskom as one example. Its cost escalation on coal alone is 10 billion rand due to bad procurement decisions taken over the last 10 years. Its losses last year were 20 billion rand. You see how these things all add up. So the future that we're bequeathing is one in which you have an economy crippled by debt, that crowds out spending on what our people do need, which is education and healthcare, social services, public infrastructure, in favor of continuing to prop up failing state-owned enterprises which don't employ as many people as the broader economy could, or other sectors of the economy could if there was deregulation, if there were more competitors in these sectors. And so we're going to be bequeathing high youth unemployment, we're going to be bequeathing low growth, we're going to be bequeathing high levels of debt. We are fast on our way to becoming the Greece of Africa if we are not careful. And it requires some hard choices, but we've heard comments about hard choices for a decade. We've heard comments about hard choices being made as part of the New Dawn. I'm still waiting to see a single hard choice.
All right, Pule Mabe, I must just ask about e-tolls. There was a statement yesterday from the medium-term budget policy statement that the user pay principle will stay. There was a sort of, I'll call it a half announcement by the Transport Minister, Fikile Mbalula, that didn't necessarily explain what's going to happen next. What is going to happen next?
Well, Minister Mbalula did explain today that there are engagements between the Department of Transport, the Ministry of Finance, as well as the Premier of Gauteng, to begin looking at the various available choices. The people of Gauteng have spoken. They can't afford e-tolls as matters stand. So we now need to move and act with the requisite speed, considering all of the options that are there. But whatever that must be done, the people must be put first. And I think when Minister Tito Mboweni spoke about the user pay principle, it was going beyond e-tolls. He was effectively emphasizing that people must pay for services. Because, the user pay principle even apply for your own rates and taxes. You want the municipality to come and pick up your bin, pay for that service so that the municipality can continue doing its own work. You want the municipality to be able to improve road infrastructure in that ward where you live. You must be seen to also be paying for those services. So the user pay principle, Stephen, goes beyond just the e-tolling of our own freeways. Of course, that one requires us to make certain hard choices, choices that are in the interest of the people of Gauteng, or generally the people of South Africa, because Gauteng is the economic hub of the country. So when you are coming from Limpopo, Western Cape, wherever, when you are here, you get to be subjected to the same boundaries. So we need to solve them. When we went into the elections, this year, one of the hard issues on the agenda was the e-tolls. So we can't be absent from these realities, these issues that our people are raising. We've got to be seen to be taking decisive steps so that we can move the economy forward. Of course, Stephen, it is not always possible that when you make these choices, you have got to always do the things that the people out there would ordinarily endorse. Some of the hard decisions that you make might not be decisions that the people are interested in, but they might be necessary to move the economy forward.
Okay, so, I mean, e-tolls is a bit like Eskom. Hard decisions are very, very difficult, both economically but also politically. I mean, we're back to this, I'm afraid, is that you've got some people in the ANC saying they must go. The Gauteng ANC has been very, very consistent on this. And then you've got the finance minister who says no.
That's why, Stephen, it's important that that engagement does happen, so that we could all share views from different sides. The Minister of Transport could be able to say, this is the scenario. Treasury would say, this is the scenario. Gauteng could say, this is what we believe should be happening. When all of them come out, because all of these are deployees of the African National Congress to run the province, to sit in the national executive, we must be seen to be communicating a message that brings our people together. Because when we ourselves communicate different messages, we confuse the very people who are supposed to look up to us for leadership.
Pule Mabe, thank you very much indeed for coming in. The national spokesperson for the African National Congress here in Joburg. Ashor Saurapan, thank you. The spokesperson on some of these issues for the Democratic Alliance and a member of Parliament for that party. And that is on the record tonight.